Good evening, everyone. My name is Nicole, and I'm the Parent Support Worker for the Niagara Catholic District School Board Early On Child and Family Centers. Today, we are going to be highlighting the key points from Chapter 7 called The Adolescent Brain Under Construction from Dr. Jean Clinton's book, Love Builds Brains. So this is a rather unique topic here at the Early On Center, as our focus is in supporting families with children ages 6 and under. However, we've chosen to include this chapter for a couple of reasons. First of all, some of you may have children in their adolescent years, as well as children under the age of 6, and we know this will be helpful for those of you. Secondly, if we take the same perspective as Mohawk leader Tom Porter, that the very best time to influence a child is 100 years before they are born, and we can agree that learning about adolescence before our kids get there will only help us prepare in supporting them through this development. So Dr. Jean says that when adults talk about teens, the first question they always ask is, why do they do the things that they do? Whether you have a teen, know a teen, or remember being a teen, you'll know that their actions and behaviors are quite different from what we as adults would do. They love and seek risk. If their friend jumps out of a plane, you can bet they will too. I'm going to quote Dr. Jean here as she says, from an adult point of view, teens aren't thinking about what they're doing. However, the reality is that they are thinking, but they're thinking about something different than the adults who watch them. A young man who jumps out of a plane knows the risk, but is focused on more than the risk. What do you think? He's focused on the thrill of what he's doing or what he's wanting to do. End quote. So there's a lot of things going on in adolescence developing brain that influences this. But before Dr. Jean discussed this, she reminded us that every behavior has a reason. Whether you're thinking about your 2-year-old or your 16-year-old, behavior is communication, and kids are going to do well if they can. There's a reason for what's happening, and there's a situation that has arisen that led to it. And when dealing with this adolescent behavior, Dr. Jean reminds us to change our perspective from, I need to save these kids from their own demise, to realizing that youth don't need a savior. They might not be developmentally ready to accept the goodness that you're trying to offer them. What they really need is to develop trust and emotional and social skills to help them have a successful, satisfying life. So what's influencing or causing this typical adolescent behavior? Well, we can consider the biological and psychological aspects of brain development here. But first, let's just clarify, adolescence isn't limited to the teenage years. I'll continue saying this teenage word here, but adolescence really begins with puberty, say as early as 9 or 10 years old, and actually continues all the way up to 24 or 25 years of age. So to start, adolescents have a biological drive to be with peers. At this stage in their life, they are beginning to create an identity outside of the confines of their home. And Dr. Jean makes a humorous point here as she clarifies that the survival of the human race is really dependent on this biological drive. I quote her as she said, if kids had just stayed quietly in the cave with mom and dad, they'd never have gone out across the plains to meet other groups of girls and boys. They would have never procreated, and we wouldn't have the wonderful billions of people we have on Earth today. So here we have teenagers struggling to fit in with different social groups as they try to understand who they are within their rapidly changing bodies. And then we have the adults who surround them, seeing them to be just like us, same size, same appearance, and therefore must be ready to manage their own thoughts, emotions, and actions as they wait patiently for the chance to adult. But if we look at the psychological aspects at play in their brain development, we can truly see how different their brains are from adults. Remember last week we talked about the brain. So we have the midbrain, the limbic or emotional system, and then the cortex or logical brain, a person's thinking brain. So the prefrontal cortex it's continuing to develop throughout the adolescent years. So this, like I said, can go all the way up to the age of 25, where this part of the brain is still developing. That's very different from early years in North America, or even current climates in other countries, where people leave home and take on these adult roles as early as the age of 16 or 18 years old. For example, Alexander the Great was king of the ancient Greek kingdom of Macedon by the age of 20. But the fact presented regarding brain development hasn't changed. It just wasn't yet discovered. So focusing back, the brain is still developing well into the late adolescent years. So what does it mean to be thinking with the emotional brain before the logical? Well, Dr. Jean explains it like this, and I quote loosely here. On one hand, we've got the emotional brain that says, hey man, I want to do it. It's so exciting, whatever it is. On the other hand, there's the executive director that's still in training or not even hired yet. She references Steinberg and others to explain this dilemma as being like having an inexperienced driver with a fast accelerator but no brake. Likewise, the ways in which the brain differs between adult and adolescent can really create a gap within your connection between parent and child. It can be hard to understand each other. Research even tells us that an adult and a teen will actually perceive emotion differently, where an adolescent will process emotion in that limbic system or the emotional system instead of the developing logical system like adults do. So, with this research, it's thought that teens might be misinterpreting facial expressions or emotions to be more angry. They are essentially reading emotion cues with the part of their brain that warns them of impending danger. So you can imagine how turned off they'd be by your worry or concern when they leave the house to be with friends. I don't have a teenager to share my experience here, so I can't really say that I understand how difficult it can be to connect with teens in our lives, but from a developmental perspective, I truly can understand and I empathize. But I hope that this information can sort of bridge that gap. The final message within this chapter that I'd like to share is consistent with previous chapters. The way we think directs how we feel and shapes how we act. If we expect teenagers to be mini adults, then we'll get pretty mad when we no longer consume their worlds, or when they make dangerous decisions that make zero sense to us. And how will this affect us? It's going to affect the way that we approach them, and we'll be more likely to get angry with the way they are behaving instead of checking in and seeing if they're doing okay. And it's important not to think that, once a kid reaches adolescence that they don't need their parents anymore. They do. They need you now more than ever. But they don't need you sheltering them from their emotional-based decisions. They need you to support their sense of belonging and identity. They need you to listen, and they need to know that they can trust you. No matter what disconnection you're feeling, no matter how hard it gets with your adolescent child, the message you need to continue sending is, hey, I'm here and I accept you for who you are. We're going to connect again next week for Chapter 8. Talk to you soon.